everybody. Today we will be going over Boolean and conditional operators. So let's hop right into it. So the basics with conditional operators are, it kind of runs like this. So you typically have this if or else statement here, and what this does is it starts here and it says if this condition right here is true, whatever this condition is, has to evaluate to true. If that's the case, then you come down here and do whatever is in this block. So this could be one line or multiple lines. It depends on what you want to do if this condition statement is true. Now, if this condition statement evaluates to false, then you will go down to this else clause. So if this is not true, else you come down here and you do whatever is in this block. Once again, it could be one line or multiple lines, depending on what you want to do when this condition is false. So let's get right into some examples then. We'll go over a basic true or false or null example. So here I have example set to false. And I go in and I say if example is double equals is just the evaluator. It evaluates this, whatever's here, and whatever is here. So it says if example is equal to true, so if example is equal to true, which it's not, it's false. So since it's false, it's going to skip over the body here, the print, this statement is true. But if example was equal to true, then this would evaluate to true, right? Example is indeed equal to true, and you would come here and print this statement. But in this case, it's not, so let's move to the next statement. Now we have this elif statement. Elif is basically the same as if, but it just allows you to check multiple conditions within your statement. So if you, instead of just having two values where it's if something's equal to one thing, otherwise it's equal to the other thing, that's an if else. If elif allows you to check multiple statements at once. So if it's not a dog, or elif it's not a cat, do this. So if it, let me redo that example. So if it's a dog, then I'll do this here. Elif, if it's a cat, I might do this here. And if it's not a cat nor a dog, then I'll do this statement here. That's kind of how elif works. But in this example, we have elif example is equal to none, which example is not equal to none in this case. It's equal to false. So we skip this body as well. In that case, we now move on to the else statement. So now we're just going to end up doing whatever is in here, which says it's going to print out the statement is not none or true. So if we were to run this example, it should print out that last line. The statement is not none or true. Okay, so that's a basic on how that works. I will quickly just explain this none thing right here because that may be confusing. None is basically an object that doesn't have, it may not have a value in it. It's defined as none. None is kind of this, it's like a null operator if anybody is familiar with that, but it basically means that there's nothing in this object here. So if you just want, you know, something to, you want to create this variable, but you don't actually want to give it a value, and maybe you can assign the value later or do whatever you have to later, you can give it a none value, and that this example value will hold a value of none, which is basically nothing. It doesn't do anything. So that's just quickly how none works. Okay, from here, we're on to negation. Now, negation is the opposite of equals. It's not equals. So in this example, we have num is equal to 1, and we go ahead and check our if else once again. So if num is, now this exclamation point equals is not equals, that's what that means. It's the not / negation. So if num is not equal to 10, which that's true because num is 1, so this evaluates to true, so we should go to this body here. Print example is not equal to 10. Now, if num was equal to 10, then you would come down to this else statement and print that the example is equal to 10. It's as simple as that. So not / negation is just checking not equals typically. Something is not equals to something else. And I'll quickly run this example again to show that the example is not equals to 10 is what prints out, which is correct because num is not equal to 10. Okay. So now we will move on to the example of not is it's kind of a strange thing. It's not typically used. It's the same as negation here, but in a different sense. I typically wouldn't use it, but I'll just explain it. It's if something is not true, then this will evaluate to true. So in this case, we have example is equal to false. So we have if not example. So, typically you may see it like this, right? This is how we usually see it. So if example, right? If this is true, let me give an equivalence actually to make this a little clearer. So this is the same as saying if example equals true, this statement here that I've written down, example equals true, is the same thing as just writing if example. It just checks if it's true or false. So in that case, by saying if not example, this is basically the same thing as if example is not equal to true, which in this case is, what does this evaluate to? Well, example is false, right? Which it's asking if example is not equal to true, so false is not equal to true, which means that this statement evaluates to true. Hopefully that's not too confusing, but this same notation here, example not equals to true, is the same thing as writing if not true. However, I would recommend against using this notation because there are some complications to it that you may run into, but I just wanted to show it for the case of showing it. Okay, moving on. Now we're down to, is this the right thing? Yeah. Okay, so empty sequences or empty mappings. Now, an empty sequence or mapping, this typically relates to things like lists, tuples, strings. As far as mapping goes, usually a dictionary is a typical mapping that you'll use. But here we have the example. I'll just run through this and hopefully it makes intuitive sense. But here, once again, we're checking if item. Now, what does that mean? Once again, we're asking if item is true technically, right? Equals true. Now, how do you actually test that though for this? This is like a list. This is not like a value or anything like that. Well, in this case, item will evaluate to false if it's an empty list, string, any of those objects that I listed before. If those are empty, then this item will return false. If there's anything in this list or string or whatever, then it will return true. That's how it works here. I will run this example twice just so we can kind of get a feeling for both of those, but this is pretty straightforward. Oh, I got an error due to triple string. Oh, apologies. Where is the... think I messed up these strings. Is that right? Get rid of that. Okay, hopefully that's correct. Apologies for that. Okay, so now we ran it and it says the item is empty, right? It said if item is true, which it's not because there's nothing in here. So if there's nothing in there, it evaluates the false. So this statement is not true. So it's going to skip this. It's going to go to this else statement, and then it's going to print out the body here. The item is empty, which it does. Now, if I was to put an item in this list, so now I put just a single number, you can put whatever you want in there, it doesn't matter. If I'm to run this now, you see there is something in the item. Now, obviously, that means if item evaluated to true, because this body was printed out here. And once again, this evaluates to true, this item here, which is just this, evaluates to true because there is something within whatever you have here. Whether that's a list, a string, anything like that. So I'll do that. Now we're down to comparison operators, which again, if you've done anything with math, which obviously everyone should have, this is pretty straightforward. So we have basic comparison operators, so less than and equal to, greater than or equal to. All those operators can be used for comparison. Here's just a quick example to run through that. So we have num1 is equal to 4, num2 is equal to 5, and num3 is equal to 4. Now, if I was to say if num1 is less than or equal to num3, then I'm going to print out this statement here, which you can ignore what's actually in the statement because it's poorly written. You know, I think it was written for another example. But either way, if this evaluates to true, once again, we come down to this body here. Otherwise, if num1 is not less than or equal to num3, then it's going to come down here and perform this once again. So in our case here, it looks like num1 is 4 and num3 is 4. So they're technically equal, which means this statement should evaluate to true, which means that this body will get executed. And we'll run that and see that now. So we get num2 is greater than num1, which is simply just printing out the statement here, which is irrelevant to this example, but hopefully you get the point there. So yeah, you can do these with any operators. I'll just show, like, you could do the greater than, less than, or I already did the less than or equal to, and you can also do greater than or equal to. All of those operators can be used here to write out these conditional statements. All right, and on to the last topic of this video, multiple conditions. This is where things get kind of interesting because you can have more than one conditional statement on a single line, technically, a single if statement. So we come down to this example here. Looking at it now, we have, so I guess I'll explain. We have these variables set here, and we come down here and say if A is equal to B or C is equal to D, do this. If those aren't true, if that case isn't true, which I'll go over this OR operator in a second, if that's not true, then you're going to come down here. So, what does OR actually mean? Well, OR means that either of these conditions can come out to true. So either one of these can evaluate to true, and this whole statement here becomes true. It's automatically true. Okay, so if A is actually equal to B, it doesn't matter what C is, if C is equal to D. This whole statement now becomes true. Okay, So now let's look at this in context to our example. So we have a is equal to 1, b is equal to 2, and then we check if a is equal to b, which clearly that's not the case. So that becomes false because they're not equal. Then you check or if c is equal to d, which is not the case because c is equal to 3 and d is equal to true. Those obviously are not equal to each other. So this also equals false. So this entire statement is once again false. So it'll avoid this, obviously, and come down to this else statement and execute this, which this statement, once again, is not accurate. Well, it should print out this exact statement. So we will quickly run that. Now, let's see. So we get A and B are equal, and B and C are equal, which is perfect. That's exactly what should have happened, because neither of these two are true. That's how an OR statement works. Now, if I was to make one of these true, right, if I was to say C is not equal to D, now that statement is true because 3 is not equal to true. So this statement will evaluate to true, which means that the entire statement should evaluate to true. That's regardless of if A is equal to B. So we will run that, and now you'll see that since the initial if statement is true, the first line should be printed. And as you can see, that is the case. A and B are not equal, and B and C are not equal, which again, ignore the message, but it did print out this line. Now, there is another operator besides OR, and it's called AND. And what AND does is it basically takes into account both things. So instead of an OR statement where only one may matter, in the AND statement, both have to be a certain value to be, both have to be true to evaluate to true. So in this case, if A is equal to B, right, this is not true. 1 is not equal to 2. So this already makes this whole statement false now because of that one statement that's not true. It doesn't matter that this is true now. With an AND statement, they both have to be true. This, as far as how many statements you can have as well, it doesn't matter. You can continuously add more statements and, you know, whatever else you want to check and just keep going down the line. Same with the OR statements. And you can mix and match those statements too. So you can have, if these two are equal, you know, ANDed together here, something like that, or some other statement, A is not equal to C. You can have that. That's perfectly fine. It's just you have to keep track of your logic now, because what's going to happen here is you'll have if A is equal to B and if C is not equal to D, both have to be true for this entire section here to evaluate to true. And if that's true, then this doesn't matter here. But in the case that this is not true, because either one of those are false, because it's an AND statement, you can have either one of these be false. If that's the case where this evaluates to false, then you have to OR with A is not equal to C, which means that if this is true, then it doesn't matter that this evaluated to false. This can be, this is evaluated to true, and this should come down here and execute this statement. So keeping track of your logic when you're dealing with multiple and or statements in your if statement is it's pretty tricky. It's hard to do, but it's a very useful feature, and you'll probably end up using it pretty often. So I'd practice, do a few examples like these. Pretty straightforward, but you'll kind of get the hang of how to work with the two different and or operators. Hopefully those examples were enough, though, to kind of get you rolling on how that actually works. But past that, I think that's about it for topics I have today. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video and found it useful, and I'll talk to you in the next one.